Welcome to PWD Music. I'm Dr. Patrick Engler, and today we're going to be talking about some techniques and tricks that you can use to improve your sight reading. Sight reading is one of those things that is kind of a boogeyman for a lot of students because it's not something that's easy to just jump into. It takes some practice for most people, and you have to develop the skill of being able to look at something and play it with pretty high proficiency just at first sight. So that leads us to our big main point here, and the best way to improve sight reading is to just practice it. Make yourself do it. It doesn't have to be a tense thing. If you just look at something new when you're sitting down to practice at home, it doesn't have to be in front of anyone. You're just doing it for yourself to practice, pulling up a piece of music, seeing what you can do at the first sight, and improving that way. As with many things, just practicing it will help you develop your own tips and tricks that will work the best for you as you discover what the best methods for how you like to learn are. So, opening up to a random etude, let's talk about some things that we can look at before we even play to help us get a better grasp on sight reading. So we'll take it more from a beginner standpoint, and don't neglect to look at the big global things. So make sure you're looking at time signature, key signature, the form of the piece, how long it is, all that kind of stuff, just to get an idea of what's going on. It doesn't have to be, we're not looking at it at all before we play. Get some idea of what you're doing first. Next, you want to scan through and see what you can come up with as problem areas. So some of those might be where we have an interesting subdivision or really small subdivision. So if we have a passage where it's a lot of fast notes, we might want to earmark that as something to take a little bit slower when we get there. Or if we see a lot of accidentals or something like that. Things that we wouldn't be able to just kind of flip a switch in our brain and consider just the time signature, key signature, and just go through it. You want to earmark those things that might cause a little bit of trouble or be a little bit of a speed bump in your initial playthrough. If we take some of that information, then we want to make sure that we're picking a starting tempo that isn't too crazy. So we don't want to be going too fast. We want to keep it reasonable. So just for an example, if we find a passage that's got a little bit faster subdivision, so if we're playing, we'll say like 16th notes or something, we want to pick a tempo where you can imagine playing that and getting through that with reasonable proficiency. Again, we're sight reading. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just working on getting better at it right now. So you want to find the parts that, those speed bumps that we talked about just a second ago, and think about how fast you'd need to take it to get through those. Of course, you do want to challenge yourself a little bit. Push yourself to go through it a little bit faster. We are just sight reading. We can fix it later with some practice. Beyond that, we want to think about what the important things to get in the music are. We're not going to get everything sight reading, but if we pick and make our priorities, we can get a little bit more than if we just try and throw in everything in the suitcase. So the big things we definitely want to get as best we can when we're sight reading: notes and rhythms. That's kind of the bottom of your pyramid. If we don't have those, everything else isn't really going to make a difference. So I want to make sure we have notes and rhythms first. Then we can talk about things like, if it's a more technical piece, we want to focus on maybe the fingers, the articulation, maybe even the tempo if we feel comfortable. If it's a more expressive piece, a little bit slower, maybe we want to focus on dynamics, phrasing, things like that, so that depending on what we're trying to do in the piece, we're getting a little bit more of that right away. As you get more comfortable with sight reading, what I find helps a lot is if we try to find familiar patterns. And so this is a reason that we work on fundamentals and do patterns like scales or thirds or arpeggios over and over. It's not because those are just finger exercises. We could do anything for finger exercises. But those patterns are commonly found, at least in small pieces in music. So when we practice those as our fundamentals, we can easily see those patterns when they crop up in a piece, and we don't have to think about relearning that passage, so to speak. We already know the fundamental, and we can just group it as a larger block when we're reading. So there's a few tips to work on getting your sight reading a little bit better. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. As always, like, follow, and we'll keep these videos coming. See you in the next one. If you made it this far, thanks for watching through the entire video. I hope it was helpful. Normally this is where I have a card with links to my Patreon and my Etsy, but I wanted to take a second to give you an idea of what you're going to find at both of those. For my Patreon, there's one level, $5 a month, and that's to help keep these videos coming out. I know lessons can be expensive, and I want this information to be able to be found regardless of your situation, whether you can take lessons or not. The $5 a month also gets you access to a PWE Music Discord server, which if it's not up when you're watching this video, it should be soon. And as of right now, that's just an opportunity to ask me questions, get my thoughts on things, and hopefully as the community grows, you'll be able to get in touch with clarinetists and musicians from around the world. At my Etsy shop, you'll find custom woodworking, and applicable to this are custom reed cases. So as a woodworker, I enjoy making accessories for musical instruments, and everybody should have a reed case if you don't. And not that you need to have a fancy custom one, but I do offer 3D printed reed cases as well as custom wood cases. So hopefully you'll check out either one, give some support to the channel, and I'll keep these videos coming.